Okay, next section is disaster response. President Biden entered office with clear directions to his staff to marshal every available resource at the government's disposal when disasters strike, to provide a comprehensive approach to the response, recovery, and long-term rebuilding and economic revitalization of communities. In 2024 alone, President Biden approved a record 101 requests for federal assistance from governors and tribal nations, and more than 270 across the entirety of his administration, authorizing billions of dollars in direct financial and technical assistance to survivors and impacted communities for everything from search and rescue efforts and clearing debris to providing temporary housing and rebuilding public infrastructure. Health care. President Biden delivered health insurance coverage to millions more Americans while also lowering health care costs. In addition to building on, strengthening, and protecting Medicare, Medicaid, and the Affordable Care Act, President Biden signed laws such as the American Rescue Plan and the Inflation Reduction Act to lower prescription drug costs and health insurance premiums. Thanks to the president's efforts, more Americans had health insurance than under any other president in the country in history. He beat Big Pharma to deliver lower drug costs for seniors and families. President Biden took on Big Pharma to save millions of Americans money on the costliest prescription drugs on the market. Drug price negotiation. For the first time in history, Medicare reached agreements on new lower prices with the manufacturers of drugs selected for the first round of drug price negotiation. When these lower prices go into effect, people with Medicare save $1.5 billion in out-of-pocket costs for their prescription drugs, and Medicare saved $6 billion in the first year alone. Because of President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, Medicare selected up to 15 additional drugs covered for negotiation in 2025. That was what was planned. Up to an additional 15 drugs in 2026, and up to 20 drugs every year after that for negotiation and the price. Cap on insulin costs. As part of President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, nearly 4 million seniors with Medicare started to see their insulin costs capped at $35 per month. Cap on out-of-pocket prescription drug costs. Because of President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, out-of-pocket costs on prescription drugs were capped for seniors at $2,000 per year as of this year. Well, that was before. Drug companies pay rebates when they increase prices faster than inflation. Thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, drug manufacturers now paid rebates to Medicare if their price increases for certain drugs exceed inflation. Access to vaccines at no cost. Starting in 2023, the Inflation Reduction Act eliminated out-of-pocket costs for vaccines covered under Medicare Part D. This included vaccines to prevent shingles, whooping cough, and other diseases. Coverage for new medications. The Biden-Harris administration proposed a new rule to significantly expand coverage of anti-obesity medications. This proposal would expand access to anti-obesity medications for an estimated 3.4 million Americans with Medicare, and approximately 4 million adult Medicaid enrollees would also gain new access to these medications. Hearing aids over the counter. The administration issued a rule that allows adults with mild to moderate hearing loss to buy hearing aids at a store or online without a prescription or an exam or audiologist fitting. This provided significant breathing room for the nearly 30 million Americans with hearing loss. Strengthened access to affordable health care. More Americans under Biden have had health insurance than under any previous president. The president's efforts to lower health insurance premiums led to record-breaking enrollment in the Affordable Care Act's marketplaces. To date, Nearly 50 million people had enrolled in Affordable Care Act coverage at some point in their lives. Expanding access to health insurance. The nation's uninsured rate hit record lows since Biden took office. Keeping health insurance premiums low. Thanks to the President's American Rescue Plan and Inflation Reduction Act, millions of Americans saved an average of $800 a year on premiums. Lower premiums have helped nearly 24 million people sign up for coverage, nearly double from when the president took office, including tripling Black and Latino enrollment in ACA coverage. Expanding Medicaid. With help from American Rescue Plan funds, 4 states, Missouri, North Carolina, Oklahoma, and South Dakota, expanded Medicaid in the last 4 years, bringing health insurance to over 1 million Americans. Closing research gaps in women's health research. The President and the First Lady launched the first ever White House initiative on women's health research to fundamentally change how our nation approaches and funds women's health research. The First Lady announced nearly $1 billion in new federal investments in women's health research, galvanized by the initiative, including through the first of its kind ARPA-H Sprint for Women's Health. The President called on Congress in the State of the Union to make a record $12 billion investment in women's health research and signed an executive order directing the most comprehensive set of executive actions ever taken to expand and improve research on women's health. In December 2024, the First Lady convened a White House conference on women's health research. Ensuring access to mental health care. President Biden committed to tackling the mental health crisis by making health plans provide adequate coverage and providing agencies with the needed support to make sure they are doing so. The Biden-Harris administration finalized a mental health parity rule, which requires health plans to make sure they covered mental health and substance use care at the same level as any other health care for over 175 million Americans. President Biden also launched the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, which has answered more than 13 million calls, texts, and chats. The Lifeline added American Sign Language in 2023, making the Lifeline more accessible to millions. Making home care more available. Thanks to the American Rescue Plan, President Biden helped deliver roughly $37 billion to expand access to home and community-based care in all 50 states and improve the quality of caregiving jobs. Cranking down on junk insurance, surprise bills, and fees. The Biden-Harris administration prioritized implementing surprise billing protections, preventing 1 million Americans from receiving surprise medical bills every single month. The administration took key steps to prevent Americans from being ripped off by junk insurance that preys on vulnerable citizens by closing loopholes to ensure consumers know what they're buying and can get the health coverage that best meets their needs. Reducing the burden of medical debt. President Biden and Vice President Harris worked to protect patients and reduce the burden of medical bills. The Biden-Harris administration finalized a rule to remove medical debt from consumer credit reporting, ensuring that unpaid medical bills do not keep people from taking out a loan to buy a home, a car, or to start a new business. In addition, through the American Rescue Plan funds, the Biden-Harris administration helped states and localities provide direct medical debt forgiveness, with local jurisdictions on pace to receive up to $7 billion in medical debt by 2026. Protecting seniors by improving safety and quality of care in the nation's nursing homes. The Biden-Harris administration established a minimum nursing home staffing requirement given findings about the ties between staffing ratios and improved outcomes, took action to reduce resident room crowding, and reinforce safeguards against unnecessary medications and treatments. Modernizing the nation's organ transplant system. the administration took historic action to modernize the nation's organ transplant system and help the more than 100,000 on the wait list for a life-saving organ. After 40 years of the status quo, the administration secured the first legislative reforms to the nation's organ transplant system in decades, dramatically increased annual appropriations, and for the first time ever, broke up the monopoly that had long managed the organ transplant system. Addressing the maternal health crisis. In June 2022, Vice President Harris announced the Biden-Harris administration's blueprint for addressing the maternal health crisis, a comprehensive effort to combat maternal mortality and morbidity. Over 4 years, the Biden-Harris administration expanded postpartum Medicaid coverage from 2 to 12 months, created a new birthing-friendly hospital designation, established the first-ever baseline federal health and safety requirements for maternal emergency and obstetric services, launched the National Maternal Mental Health Hotline, expanded funding for maternal mortality review committees, and secured the first federal expansion of the maternal and child home visiting program in nearly 10 years. The next video, I'll pick it up at supporting families and access to care.